In the previous video, we added a text box and we changed what it said in ActionScript, and we even positioned it with ActionScript. However, it was very static. So what if we want some movement? So that's what we're going to do in this one. We're going to use that same text box, but we're going to make it move. So once again, I'm going to go to ActionScript 3.0 because that's what I'm writing in. We have our stage here and our timeline up here. I'm in classic mode. If you're in a different one, it might look different, like you might be in essentials, but it doesn't really matter. I just like classic because that's what was kind of the standard when I first played with Flash. We're going to add a text box here. We have our text tool, which make a quick text box. Mine is currently in classic text and in dynamic text. If you're not seeing this option here, you might be in static instead of dynamic, so just check that. And we're going to give it a name. Last time, I think we ended with text box being the name. And we changed the text in code, but we don't need to do that here. We just want to make it move. So last time we had it say hello world. How about this time we make it say, oh no, what are you doing? Help me out. We're going to make it say try movement. And that'll work. So once again, I'm going to click on the frame I'm on, and I'm going to go into Actions up here from Window. And that will give me this window here, which is way bigger than I need it to be. Let's make this more manageable. There we go. So very first thing I'm going to start with is a trace command. And if you remember this from before, this posts a little bit of text in my output. Now this isn't really seen by the user, it's more for like the person making stuff, so you can make sure that what you think is running is actually running. Therefore, if there's a problem happening, you can find out, is my code running? And then if it is, then you can try to figure out where the problem is. So inside of these parentheses, we can just put in our message, like program is running, and of course we need to end it with a semicolon just like before. Now the next bit is a bit more complicated. It's not really hard, it's just kind of understanding how it works. Previously we just started writing out what we wanted to happen and where, right? So we were using this text box. We were saying like text box.text is going to equal certain things and all that. And that would happen as soon as the program ran. And then it just wouldn't happen again. But we want this to happen over and over again, right? So that way we can have some sort of movement, of animation. So instead what we need to do is we need to have like an event. So the first thing we need to do is we need to actually tell the program that we're going to use events. So that way it can understand the code that's needed for it. So we're going to do import flash, and then events, events.events, semicolon. Now what we're going to do is we're going to define a function. And a function is something that you can create to have something do something over and over and over again. So we're going to write function to tell the software that it's a function, and we're going to call it something. So let's call it animate. And inside of these parentheses, we're going to tell it that it is an event, and we're going to open some curly braces. So what this is we have defined a function called animate, and it's going to be an event, and inside of here is what it's going to contain. So whenever we call animate, it's going to do whatever is inside of these two curly braces. So just like before, how we told something to move, we told a position to move, or we told the text to change, we could throw that same sort of code in here, and whenever we call it, it's going to do that. So we're going to do text box dot y, and it's going to be equal to itself plus 1. So if it's equal to itself, this y, keep in mind that y is on the vertical, if it's equal to itself plus 1, then it's going to be 1 point lower than it is currently. And if it will do this over and over and over again, then the text should move down the screen. So we've defined this function. If we call it, nothing's going to happen yet because we've defined it, we've told it what to do when we call this, but we've never actually called it. So now what we need to do is we need to add an event listener and that's going to be event enter underscore frame and then the name of our function, so animate. So as soon as it enters this frame, it's going to look for this function. So let's give it a try. There we go. We can see that this program is running and we can see that it is moving. Now if we go back into our code and we go back into actions, if we do +2, then it should move twice as fast. So let's try that. And if we do minus, then it should go in the opposite direction. And not only can we do y, but we can also do x. So keep in mind that x is the horizontal. So if we do x equals itself plus 1, and we run this, now it will move on both the horizontal and the vertical plane because we're telling it to move on both. Let's make them both positive so we can see it longer. There we go. And of course this is not moving at a perfect 45-degree angle because we have it moving twice as fast on the y as we do on the x. And you can play with those to see what you like. Now the last thing that I want to mention is in all of these we did equals itself plus an integer. What we could also do instead is instead of having it equal itself and an integer that we're adding here, we could have just said instead plus equals, because what that's going to make it do is it's going to be plus itself and this new integer. Which is the exact same thing as we had before, it's just a faster way of writing it. Now not only can we change the x and y value inside of this function, but we can even change this trace message that's up here. So if we tell it that we just want it to trace program is running again just like we had before, that's not very interesting because there's going to be no change, right? It's going to be constantly showing the same thing. So if we run this just to prove it, it's just constantly saying program is running. Now it's running this over and over again, so we have a whole bunch of messages in here saying program is running, but that's fairly bland. If we wanted to instead, we could actually have it tell us the current value of where our text box is. So we could say text box.x, and if we run this, it's instead going to spit out these numbers of where x currently is. Now you notice that it says 0.95 here, and you might say, well, why does it say that? Because we're adding by whole values, but that's because of where it started. So if we click on our text box and we look at x here, we can see it started at 48.95, and so that's why it's on 95 each time, because adding a whole value to that 0.95 keeps it 0.95. So if we change this to 0, we can change this to 0 as well, and we run it again, now you'll get whole integers without any decimal values. Now what if you want it to show both? That's easy enough. We just separate the two with a comma, so textbox.x and textbox.y. And so now if we test it, now we get both values. Now maybe you want them labeled. That's not a problem. We can stick some strings back in here. So open and close some double quotes, and we can say x value is, and separate it with a comma. And then after this comma, we can also say y value is, close those double quotes, and separate with another comma. And now if we run this, there you go. Now we have x value is and y value is. And you can see they're constantly increasing because I have not stopped the program. Where is it? There we go. And you can see in here that the x value is increasing much faster than the y value because that's what we chose to do. So x is skipping by 4 and y is only increasing by 1 because that's what we wrote in here. In addition to adding static amouse, we could also instead actually make this equal to where our mouse is located. So let's change y to mouse y, and let's change x to mouse x. And now the text box will follow our cursor. And you can see in the output up there, it is also changing the value of x and y based on where my cursor is. So that's it for this one. In a next video, we will include a button.